And here now, Andrij Dobriansky, Director of Communications and Media for the Ukrainian Congress Committee of America. Good to see you again, Andrij. I hope you've been well. Happy New Year. Happy Valentine's Day. We've got to get to this latest reporting from Kelly, hearing from Zelensky out of his own mouth, kind of basically saying, let me just tell you the truth. The U.S., including the Biden administration, really never were going to give us or offer us NATO membership. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it was a great discussion with a number of U.S. senators on the future of U.S.-Ukrainian relations. President Zelensky basically underscored the point that stands in contrast to a lot of Russian propaganda that's out there, some of which we've heard from the mouth of President Trump, even in the Oval Office earlier this week, that saying that Ukraine's membership in NATO is why Russia attacked. And President Zelensky just made it very clear that that was never on the table. That was never going to happen anytime soon. And so using that as a reason for attacking is preposterous. Not only that, it takes the focus off the numerous crimes that are happening, including what you mentioned earlier about the attack on the Chernobyl containment zone, this largest movable piece of architecture ever built in history by numerous countries to protect the world from radiation coming out of there. That in and of itself is a terrorism crime that Ukraine will submit to the international courts.
How do we process Zelensky's tone, though? I mean, the Secretary General of NATO, a Dutch politician, he actually said within the past 24 hours as well that NATO membership was never promised to Ukraine. But when I hear how Zelensky was speaking, is that an olive branch to Russia and to America, saying, listen, we don't need NATO membership. That's not what we're here for? Or is it to kind of say, you know what, we were misled. We thought we might have NATO membership. How should we perceive his comments?
Right. So NATO is being used in a lot of comments this week. What you mentioned about the previous minister and Ukraine not being promised NATO in the last year or as a result of this invasion is what was being said. Ukraine has been promised NATO since the 2008 Bucharest NATO summit, and it has been reiterated in every summit since then, specifically since the 2022 summit after this most recent invasion. All the NATO countries have pledged that, yes, Ukraine will be a NATO member. So Ukraine has been promised that. Ukraine has it within its constitution that it will one day be a NATO member. However, this is not as a result. What's being talked about this week, specifically by Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, is that it's his understanding that NATO membership is not a part of this eventual ceasefire or end of hostilities, that NATO membership will be an entirely separate thing. And during that discussion that President Zelensky just had, the one we're citing, with 5 different U.S. senators, Senator Lindsey Graham said, what I propose is Senator Lindsey Graham said that we should put NATO membership as a trigger. Tell Russia we're going to stop hostilities now, but if you invade any other country again, Ukraine automatically gets into NATO, and that's his solution for NATO membership.
Thank you for breaking all of that down. President Trump will be meeting with President Putin of Russia. Talk is maybe in Saudi Arabia at some point. Mm-hmm. Is there concern that Ukraine is being sidelined from the negotiations for peace?
I think there's concern from everybody about being sidelined. That's why Munich is so important. A lot of these announcements by members of the presidential administration here in the United States or President Trump himself include some kind of European peacekeepers, Europe increasing its production, Europe doing this and that. And yet, Vice President Vance declined to meet with the Chancellor of Germany while in Germany, and yet all of these European leaders have yet to be invited into a conversation. I believe President Trump was asked, why don't you just do this within the confines of the G20? You already have most of Europe within the G20. You can start the conversation there. But as we saw in the first administration, President Trump loves his summits, loves going back to the 1980 playbook of something in Helsinki like we saw in 2018. So I think what we're going to see is conversations happening led by President Trump. But the work continues on with all the other nations. And we just heard several important announcements from Europe, including not only increasing the aid to Ukraine, but that the majority of the European Union Parliament is in favor of forming a special tribunal to look into all the war crimes that have happened during this war.
One last question for you. Obviously, President Trump has wondered why America was footing much of the bill for this war, while Europe was giving loans in some cases, things that Ukraine would have to pay back. How certain is Ukraine that this will be peace, that there will be a resolve from President Trump, Putin, and Zelensky's conversations?
Well, part of the thing is the innovative idea of having the rare earth minerals deal, which would include territory currently occupied by Russia. I think as the sooner that is signed, the more secure Ukraine is that the United States will not cede any of that territory to the invader. But as far as what the eventual possibilities are here, Ukraine is just going to keep on moving ahead because there's no other possibility. So long as Ukraine keeps developing its own weapons, it will be using less of American weapons, unless, as we heard from the senators today, we unlock that 300 million that's being frozen of Russian funds, and Ukraine can pay for those weapons. Ukraine could also pay for the weapons from the money being gained by the rare earth minerals deal. But what's important to realize is that Ukraine was never receiving dollar amounts of weapons. Ukraine was receiving outdated, expired munitions. A lot of these weapons are first generation, as opposed to what is being sold this year and last year to Middle Eastern, South Asian countries by the United States arms manufacturer. What Ukraine was getting was things that were so expired that the United States was contractually mandated to pay the manufacturer to explode it and then buy new stuff. Instead, the United States very smartly said, we're just going to send that to Ukraine. They're going to figure out how to refurbish it if they need it, use it if they need it, and the United States won't be on the hook to pay Raytheon or other manufacturers to blow this up and waste this munition.
Well, you gave us a lot to think about and to Google following this conversation. Thank you for the perspective. Andrij, always good to speak with you. Have a wonderful weekend. Thank you.